Explosive new developments today in the Patrick Kane Rape Investigation.
Yesterday, the rape kit evidence bag was anonymously delivered to the home of my client's mother.
The attorney for the alleged victim wants to know who tampered with the evidence.
This is a classic example why rape victims don't come forward.
My question is that someone who's not happy with the results?
Live team coverage begins right now. Tonight, dramatic new developments in the Patrick Kane rape investigation. The attorney representing the woman who claims that the hockey superstar raped her at his Hamburg home last summer now says that someone has tampered with her rape kit and then left it at the doorstep of her mother. Her attorney calling for an independent investigation now. Patrick Kane's attorney says his client is 100% innocent. 7 Eyewitness News has live team coverage tracking these startling new developments this afternoon. Our reporter Hannah Bueller spoke with Kane's attorney Paul Cambria today. That's coming up in a moment, but we begin with 7 Eyewitness News reporter Jill Perkins. She's breaking down what we have learned this afternoon. Jill.
Good evening, Keith. The attorney for Kane's accuser says he's never seen an evidence bag outside of a courtroom or a crime lab, let alone showing up on somebody's doorstep. And as you mentioned, he's now calling for an independent investigation to determine exactly what happened here. A shocking moment in the Patrick Kane rape investigation as this evidence bag, which attorneys say once contained the rape kit of the hockey star's alleged victim, is held up in front of news cameras.
We have an evidence bag that was ripped open. Something was either taken out of it or placed in another bag.
Attorney Tom Ioannou, who represents Kane's accuser, says the evidence bag was tampered with and anonymously delivered to his client's mother's house. He's now calling for an independent investigation.
We need to bring in the FBI or state troopers or some other law enforcement agency to find out who had that bag, who put it in my client's mother's doorstep, and why.
Ioannou says his team has worked to authenticate the bag, which he says is labeled with his client's name, date of birth, and confirms the initials of the nurse who administered the rape kit. He's asking whoever delivered it to come forward.
We're hoping to find out how this happened and who had the incentive to modify or tamper with the evidence.
Now, the Hamburg Police Department responding to all of this today, saying, quote, the Hamburg Police Department will cooperate with any authorized investigation regarding the handling of evidence and the procedure of such. That said, the Hamburg Police Department has documentation that unequivocally demonstrates that its handling of the evidence and the integrity of its chain of custody of evidence in this case is unassailable. Now, back out here live, Ioannou also said today that any reports that have recently surfaced about DNA evidence or the lack thereof are not credible and that they're only meant to discredit his client. It was last week in Chicago that Kane broke his silence, maintaining his innocence. Coming up at 6 o'clock, you'll hear what Ioannou has to say about that. But first, I want to hand things over to my colleague, Hannah Bueller. She spoke with Paul Cambria, Kane's attorney. Hannah, what did he have to say today?
Jill, Paul Cambria firing back at some of these comments made earlier today by Tom Ioannou. But first, I have learned new details of the results of that rape kit that we've been talking about. Now, according to Cambria, a few weeks ago, both sides of this case learned the results of that kit. And according to Cambria, there was no DNA evidence below the waist belonging to Patrick Kane. Now, he says other male DNA was found, but again, it was not Patrick Kane's. Cambria says there was no question of the chain of events between the hospital where the kit took place to the lab and when the technician reviewed the evidence. The question seems to come now after the lab and up until now. Who had custody of this bag, and is the bag found even authentic?
I don't know anything about it. I'm sitting here listening to someone saying, I found this bag at my door and I think it's the evidence bag in this case. I'm somebody who works on facts, and that obviously they're not happy with the results. And so they're the ones questioning the integrity of the exhibits.
And Cambria maintains his client's innocence as it relates to this investigation. He too believes District Attorney Frank Sedita needs to fully investigate what happened here. Now, Cambria says he and what he calls the Kane camp would have had no reason to tamper with this evidence and bring this bag to the victim's home. He says because that evidence was favorable to Patrick Kane and he wouldn't want to compromise the investigation. He believes that the other side would have had more of a reason to. Cambria also says his client voluntarily gave his DNA as it relates to this case in his office. He tells me he watched it all happen. We'll, of course, have much more on this investigation coming up for you in the coming hours. For now, reporting live in downtown Buffalo for Jill Perkins, I'm Hannah Bueller. Keith, back to you.
All right, Hannah, Jill, thank you. Now, the Erie County Commissioner of Central Police Services, John Glascott, issued this statement just about an hour ago. All evidence related to this case that was given to the Erie County Central Police Services Department by the Town of Hamburg Police Department is accounted for and remains in its original packaging in the possession of Erie County Central Police Services. This includes the evidence in the rape kit and the packaging itself. For more insight now on what exactly has happened in this big story today, we would like to bring in Florina Altschuyler. She is the managing attorney for the Buffalo office of Russo and Toner. Now, I know you've prosecuted sexual abuse cases all over the place. I know that you were assistant district attorney for the state of Alaska. You've been involved in these types of things. Is it possible that this really isn't evidence at all? This is a cruel hoax or joke that someone has played?
Well, it is absolutely possible that this is not evidence from the sexual assault kit. The sexual assault kit normally has white envelopes, several of them, each separately containing the swabs taken from the victim's body and then placed into those white envelopes. Those white envelopes would then be placed into a white box. The box is what is known as the rape kit. It is not a paper bag.
So could this be possibly a piece of evidence that could have been evidence, but maybe at the hospital something happened, there was a tear in the bag, something was wrong, it wasn't all there, so it was thrown away in the garbage and maybe someone lifted it out and walked away with it?
That is absolutely the most likely scenario here because it has a pre-label with the name of the person and the date, but what is notably absent from this bag is any initials or a handwritten date. Anytime evidence is collected, it would have the person who collected that evidence, the forensic nurse examiner, or the police officer, initial and date that evidence. They would also seal it with tape. That's absent from that bag.
I know you specialize in these kinds of investigations. What do you think? I know you followed this case from the beginning. You're here in town. What do you think? What are your thoughts on what has happened here?
I think that this will undoubtedly now delay moving forward towards grand jury, towards indictment, because now there will need to be an investigation of the investigation, since there's an allegation of a break in the chain of custody, and since there's an allegation of tampering with evidence, which is a very serious allegation. It does not happen often. It is a criminal charge in and of itself, and so obviously a law enforcement entity will now need to look into Hamburg Police Department or the hospital's handling of this envelope.
Okay, one more quick question before you go. How difficult is it to get a conviction to prove rape as opposed to getting convictions involving other crimes?
Well, rape is a crime with historically, nationally speaking, a very low conviction rate. Conviction rates for sexual assault are somewhere around 20% nationally. So it is not easy to get a conviction, generally speaking. However, I can tell you from personal experience, having had tried dozens of sexual assault cases to verdict, I have convicted people of sexual assault without DNA evidence. DNA evidence is not absolutely essential to obtain a conviction.
Oftentimes, I suppose it's one person's claim against another.
Absolutely, and it's a question of credibility, and this case will without a doubt hinge on whether or not the alleged victim is likable, is sympathetic, is credible, and whether her story stays consistent or if there are any breaks in consistency.
All right, Florina, thanks very much for your insights, coming in and talking with us, and hopefully we'll talk with you further as this case moves along.
Certainly.
All right, thanks again. Our coverage of today's developments continues right now, actually, online. You'll find the complete statements from the FBI today, the Hamburg Police Department, and from Erie County. It's all on our website at WKBW.com.